Hello, welcome to another episode of the ARU Startup Podcast. And today I have a special guest. And it's really a privilege that our guest speaker today is in person in the studio from all the way from Paris. So today I'm going to introduce Chris Clayton. And Chris is the recent recipient of the ARU Alumni Entrepreneurship of the Year. So welcome. Firstly, welcome, Chris. How are you
Well,
feeling
happy to
today?
be here. Very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for coming all the way from such a far distance. So how was your journey first?
Oh, very quick. Very easy on the Eurostar. Fantastic.
What is the weather looking like in Paris and London?
It was raining yesterday.
In
so it happens.
In Paris or
In Paris.
In Paris.
In Paris.
So you're not in a different weather condition.
No,
anyway,
no,
so
no.
you just landed.
Honestly, it's not far. As the crow flies.
Just another world, but still, you had a massive rains anyway. So. Okay, so I think the first question for me here we want to know, because you're from a 1998 batch, which
Absolutely.
is for us
A long
particularly,
time ago.
long time, and university was completely different.
Yeah.
It was polytechnic at the time,
Yeah.
and things were. I'm sure it was very different. And you were based in Cambridge, so we would like to know more about how was your experience at university at the polytechnic, Anglo Ruskin, and what was the time? Just take us to 1998 period once, and
Yes.
just reflect on your journey.
Well, look, I have to say, and I'm going to be very honest. I planned on going to. I think I was aiming for something like Oxford or Cambridge, the real Cambridge, let's say, and because I had such a good time, didn't necessarily get the grades that I wanted, and I ended up having to make a different choice. And when I came across, as it was, the newly created Anglia Polytechnic University, I saw this program called European Business Economics, and I was looking for something international, something related to business, and ended up coming down here, fell in love with Cambridge, because you can't not fall in love with Cambridge. It was a good distance from me. I'm from Leeds originally, so it was far enough from home for my parents to miss me, but not too close. And so I jumped in, right? And honestly, because it's not, or then it was not a big university. I mean, I don't know how many you are now. I think you were mentioning 40,000 people, which is huge. And obviously things have changed a lot. But then it was small. So I think I was looking for that, intimacy and something where, you're probably going to get to know the vast majority of people on your course, and there's not thousands of people running around. It was a little bit more friendly and cozy, and but more importantly, there was the opportunity to go abroad. So I did a 4-year course, and I was looking to spend a year abroad in France.
So
I
was
was
it from
attracted to France.
94 to 98?
So 94 to 98. So the first year in Cambridge, first half of the second year in Cambridge, I think there were some work placements. Then in a year in France, in fact, even a year and a half in France, and then the last year back in Cambridge. So, I mean, honestly, great teachers, great professors, great sporting. I remember, I was part of the cricket team, the football team, the everything team, and great social life. So, didn't just work hard, played hard as well, which is part of the experience, and I would recommend that to everybody. So all in all, I had this incredible experience in a great place with a university that was a bit different, a bit more personal, a bit more intimate, a bit more creative. The international part, the sport, the social life. Came out in 1998, and didn't know what I wanted to do. Actually, didn't know what I wanted to do, and the economy at that time was actually on its way up, and I think the competition for jobs was huge. So I came out with a 2-1. So I think I scrambled my way to a 2-1 in the last year, and sent my CVs. I think I wanted to go into merchant banking or consulting, and I was sending my CV to all these wonderful big brands that we all know. And of course they all said no. So at that point you kind of say, okay, well, what are you going to do? And you have to get a bit creative. And I think I answered an advert which said something like executive search. And I'm a bit of a people guy and interested, very curious, business, the whole business environment. That's what I'd just been studying for 4 years. and fell into this thing called executive search. Had no clue what it was. And I think that decision to be curious and to go and have a look was an important moment for me. And I met somebody who explained it to me, and he was somebody that meant a lot, well, had a huge impact on my life. I think as you go through your career, you realise, you know, it's usually a journey, and you meet people, and those people have impact on your life. And Adrian had a huge impact on me. He taught me what executive search was. I shadowed him for a year and learned the trade and had a lot of fun. And actually very quickly understood that it was a very valid match for me and what I was looking for in terms of a job. But it's important to say, and this is an important message for everybody that might be listening, you know, that's at ARU now, is that don't worry about not having some very concrete plan about what you're going to do when you leave university. The fact is that you're here to learn. You're here to have a good time, to meet people, to learn about yourself, to gain confidence in yourself. Yeah. And then when you come out, guess what? The world is full of opportunities, and you shouldn't be afraid of that.
Yeah, I'm just going to go more in detail regarding your early career and, you know, what made you to go into entrepreneurship. But just before that, because we were chatting about the 1998 period in university, any few memorable events or achievements or something that you remember, you can recall from there, is still with you?
I think for me, sport was a big part of my life, and I remember playing for the first team, the football first team, and we had this, you know, we had the privilege of playing against the Cambridge colleges, and some of the Cambridge colleges, they have these wonderful grounds, wonderful facilities, and you know, literally, I remember we got to the final of the cup, and I think we were playing on one of, I think we might even been, it was one of the bigger grounds, wonderful pitch. So I've got these incredible memories from the sport, and yeah, I mean, of course, the student bar. I mean, you know, I'm not going to lie and say that I didn't spend any time there, but fond memories of all the social events, the nights, the partying, and to be honest, I mean, combined with Cambridge, you know, Cambridge in the summer, Parker's Piece.
Yes.
How much time do we spend on Parker's Piece?
In summer, mostly.
In summer.
Yeah.
Not in winter. But no, amazing. And so yeah, some very fun memories. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing and reflecting back in your journey at university. It's such a nice to know. You know, you might have a different experience, but obviously, when in undergrad period for 4 years, you'll have some similar experiences, such as involved in sports and some hobbies that students are more likely. So I think we'll just go more into detail about how you started your career. You mentioned about, you know, not knowing what to do next after the university is sometimes a very big question to most of the students group, and, and there's a lack of clarity. So when you were in the middle of a less clarity and you know, what to do next, how did you manage that situation? Did you what you know, did you just land into a job somehow, or what was the things going on in your mind at that time?
I admittedly, you know, when everybody rejects you, it's a concern, right? And there's a frustration and a worry. But I think I remember then looking at adverts. So this, you know, of the internet and job boards and all this kind of thing didn't exist then, right? So I was looking in the newspapers, and I was obviously living in Leeds, so a little bit limited to perhaps the job market up in the north. And I came across an advert in the newspaper. I think the world has moved on. Obviously, you know, the getting a job through through the platforms and the different applications and websites, and you know, there's access to a lot of jobs, I think, online.
Yeah.
But the point there is that, you know, you need to be pragmatic. It's great that everybody, if somebody has a clear career path and plan, great, you know, linked to a passion, linked to an experience, whatever it is, or something that might have happened during the university, fantastic, go for it. But people who don't necessarily know exactly which direction they want to go in. I mean, my advice would be, speak to people around you, speak to, your network, speak to people at the university. Of course, there is advice that you can get at university. But there is an element of kind of self-reflection, which is trying to understand what you are passionate about, what you enjoy doing, right? What are you comfortable doing? So, whether it's, being in contact with people, or whether it's something that's much more, numbers and figures, and, if you want to go into IT, if you want to be a software developer, that's a very different thing, right? But my point here would be, you have to be pragmatic. You have to, jobs will not come to you. You have to go out there and you have to be the master of your own destiny. So, be pragmatic, and go and, meet people and read the adverts, and by being active, things will happen, for sure. And that's what happened for me. And I was very lucky to have then fallen into an industry and an activity that suited me very well. And I understand, that's not going to happen for everybody. The other way of doing it would be to start with something, try it. If it doesn't work, that's fine. You can move to something else. That's also a way of learning, right?
Yeah, and also you mentioned about, so just moving on to your early career phase, right? You got into job market, and then I was reading, I was just looking through one of your video clips, where you mentioned about 2008 crisis, and then finding your own business, which is you started your own business in 2009, and because that was a recession period at that time, so leaving the job and then in the middle of the recession, starting a business. What made you go into entrepreneurship that time?
That's a very good point. And again, I mean, so there's a bit of a context. My dad's an entrepreneur as well, and I think I was always influenced a little bit by him. Having learned my trade, so to speak, over a number of years with other people in other companies, I guess I felt that I had a certain experience. But to be honest with you, there's an element of almost being forced into becoming an entrepreneur, because you're made redundant. You're sat there, and I actually had some clients that were saying, look, we'd like to continue working with you, and how can we do that? So then you think about going self-employed, which is what I did. I set up my own business, a small business in Paris, and therefore that enabled me to serve these clients who were asking, for me to continue working for them. And the other thing that's important to say is that in the French system, because obviously I've been living in France for 25 years, in the French system, when you get made redundant, you can then set up a company and receive money, if you like, dole money, for up to 2 years, so long as you don't pay yourself a salary. So effectively, they're encouraging people to go and create their own businesses, which is a real paradox in France, because there are many other things that are totally anti-entrepreneurial and counterproductive. But this scenario where you get made redundant, you can go and set up a company and continue to receive money for up to 2 years.
Yeah. So
basically, that allowed me to build some customers, put some money in the pot, and build a platform. But at the same time, that's when, through talking with my ex-colleagues and people in my network, we decided together, because I didn't create Beaumont Group on my own. So we were 5 co-founders, one person in Asia, in Japan, 3 other people in Europe, and together we were all in this situation, asking questions about, what are we doing? And I kind of was encouraging people, saying, look, why don't we seize this moment and this opportunity and set our own, create our own company? Yes, it's we're at the bottom of the trough. It's an economic crisis, but there's only one way up, which is up. There's only one way forward, which is up. So we took that calculated risk that we've got clients, we've got energy, we've got the passion, and we set Beaumont Group up in 2011 in October. And I remember the first meeting we had in Belgium, where we set up the holding company, and that was it. We didn't need to necessarily reinvent the world in terms of executive search as an industry and the way that we were going to go to market. But the most important thing for us was that we were 5 people with a vision of creating something together, with passion, with energy, with motivation, and that was it. Off we go.
Yeah.
2011 was the beginning of the Beaumont Group journey, and it's been an incredible ride.
So was 2009 the business you started? Was it a different one, or is it the same business?
So 2009 was me setting up my company as to be self-employed, to be able to serve my clients, and then 2010 starting the discussions with people, my ex-colleagues and contacts about the creation of something new.
Yeah.
So it didn't happen overnight, of course, and at the same time, with my self-employed status, I was building cash and putting cash aside, which would then be a platform to be able to go and create a company.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned about 2 terms here, which is executive search and executive search, and there is a advisory.
Leadership advisory.
Yeah. So for those who are listening to this terminology for the first time, what it means, and just to get a bit more of a detail about what you really do.
Okay. So recruitment is something, I think, that a term that most people are aware of. The recruitment market addresses obviously then different levels of role, and executive search is a niche within the recruitment environment which addresses really executives, right? So let's call it the top of the organization. It's something, executive search was invented at least 30 years ago, probably more, 40 years ago, by the Americans. They often invent things like this. And the context was, I think, there was a war for talent at the time. And so companies that wanted to recruit executives with certain skills were thinking, well, we're not getting any success by putting an advert out there. People are not coming to us. So we need to go to the talent. So we need to go and headhunt the talent. So the term headhunting is something that also that people might be aware of. And that's literally what it is. So executive search is where basically a client has a need to replace or to find an executive for a new role. Often it's confidential because you can imagine if somebody's in a role, for whatever reason it's not going so well, and you want to, the shareholders of the board want to change an executive, there has to be some work done confidentially behind the scenes. So they will mandate a company like us to go and basically then research a given, do the research to identify suitable executives, suitable profiles for the given position, based on a job description that's been put together with the client. And obviously, that's a process that can take many weeks to do the research, and depending on our knowledge and our network, it could go, faster. But basically, there's a period of research to identify the candidates. And then once we've got a long list of candidates, we have to go and approach them. And again, this is all about, this is often people who are in jobs, who are happy. Yeah. And we have to approach them and engage with them and start to, if we don't already know them, because often in executive search, it's people who work in a given sector, and they've worked in that sector for many, many years. And so you have an extensive network, and you can easily pick up the phone and talk to people. But if it's people you don't know, you have to build the trust, get to understand what's their situation, what are their motivations, and basically position this opportunity versus their context and their motivations. So the objective of all of this is that we are going to bring the best executive profiles for the given job. And it's not just people who are passively looking at adverts and saying, oh, that looks interesting. It's the process on its head. It's all about bringing, headhunting people, taking them out of a situation they're in and bringing them into a new one, which of course responds to, is interesting and motivating for them versus their situation and where they want to go. So executive search is about headhunting, bringing people into the client's business, and it's a people business, but it's extremely interesting people often ask me what do I do for a living, and another way of describing what I do is I get paid to meet really interesting people every day and learn something from everybody I meet, and that's how I see what I do. I help people to progress in their careers. I help companies to succeed through bringing in great people.
Yeah.
So it's and obviously that's the team. That's what we do. So that's the executive search side. Leadership advisory is a number of things. So one example is leadership integration. So when an executive comes into a new position, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of risk, there's often a lot of things that were unsaid in the job interviews. There's often, through the process to bring someone in, we sell a situation because we're trying to convince them to come. And then there's the reality, which often is not at all what I thought I was coming into. And what often happens is, there is a misalignment of expectations. And so, the clients, of course, they will try and manage that. So they will try and manage that themselves, but more often than not, it doesn't work. So we spend a period of probably on average about 6 months accompanying the person that we've just placed in an executive role through a program of regular meetings and conversations after placing the person. And we will talk with the hiring manager, all the stakeholders that we will have met even before the hire was made, to really fully understand the dynamics of the context they're going into and to get to know people. And the intention of accompanying the placement is to ensure that the person arrives, that the person quickly integrates, starts to perform quickly, is happy, and that where there is misalignment of expectations, that we align everybody again.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's about communication and alignment, expectation alignment. And to be honest, again, in many cases, companies will, hire somebody and they'll spend a lot of money to do that, but it fails. And it's a remarkable percentage of recruitments that fail because the expectations were not aligned from either the candidate coming in or the company hiring. So we have a process, that allows that guarantees to an extent that doesn't happen, that it works. There's also things like coaching, classic career coaching, leadership development. So accompanying leaders to ensure that, again, that they're on the right path, doing the right things, developing themselves, that they're happy, and that they're fulfilling their career plan. There is also interim, so we do interim management, which is a booming market. That's something that is becoming increasingly important. So companies being in a crisis situation or being in a specific context might need somebody to come in only for 6 months or a year, to take them through a process to get from A to B to C. And so there are people that do that, that want to be interim profiles, don't want to be attached to a company forever, want to have the flexibility to work when they want. So there's a lot of, that's a growing market, and in the UK it's a big business, in France a big business, in Holland, in Germany. And then of course diversity, equity, inclusion is something that our clients ask us to help them with. It's a real challenge. So whether it's hiring diverse profiles, and ensuring that they are onboarded and integrated properly.
Yeah.